What happens when a decorated war hero stands before a judge, trembling with shame, unable to explain why he violated a court order? The answer will restore your faith in humanity. But before we reveal what Judge Frank Caprio did in this Providence courtroom that made a battle-hardened Marine sergeant break down sobbing, hit that subscribe button, because stories like this remind us why justice should always be tempered with mercy. Drop a comment right now telling us about a time when someone showed you unexpected compassion when you needed it most. Staff Sergeant Marcus Daniels, age 34, walked into Courtroom 2A on the morning of October 17th wearing his dress uniform. The ribbons on his chest told a story of 3 tours in Afghanistan, a Purple Heart, and a Bronze Star for valor. But his eyes told a different story. They were the eyes of a man who had stopped sleeping, who had stopped believing he deserved to wake up at all. He stood at attention before the bench, shoulders back, chin high, the way the Corps had trained him. His hands shook despite his rigid posture. Judge Frank Caprio looked down at the file before him. Traffic violation. Ignored summons. Failure to appear. Driving with expired registration and suspended license. On paper, this was routine. But Judge Caprio hadn't spent 40 years on the bench without learning to read what wasn't written on paper. He saw the uniform. He saw the ribbons. And he saw something else. Something in the way Marcus held himself, like a man barely keeping himself together. Sergeant Daniels. Judge Caprio began, his voice carrying that distinctive Rhode Island warmth that had made him beloved far beyond Providence. It says here you were pulled over on August 29th for an expired registration. You were given a court date. You didn't show up. Then you were pulled over again on September 14th, this time with a suspended license. Can you explain to me what's going on? Quote. Marcus opened his mouth. Nothing came out. His jaw worked. His eyes welled up. The courtroom, packed with people waiting for their own cases, fell silent. Everyone leaned forward. If you've ever witnessed someone truly struggling to speak, hit that like button and stay with us. Because what happens next will absolutely floor you. Your Honor, Marcus started. His voice cracked. He cleared his throat, tried again. I don't have a good excuse, sir. Judge Caprio set down his pen. He folded his hands and looked at Marcus with the patience of a man who knew that silence could be more powerful than questions. The clock on the wall ticked. 30 seconds passed. A minute. People in the gallery exchanged glances. This wasn't normal. Court moved fast. But Judge Caprio waited. Sergeant, I'm looking at your record here, the judge finally said. Nothing. Not even a parking ticket before this year. 3 tours overseas, decorated for valor. You saved lives. And now you're standing in my courtroom for not paying a registration fee and driving with a suspended license. Something doesn't add up. Help me understand. Marcus swallowed hard. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, then released. The tremor was visible now. Permission to speak freely, Your Honor? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Please, Judge Caprio said. Tell me what's happening. I came home from my last deployment 18 months ago, sir, Marcus began. The words came slowly, painfully, like each one cost him something. My best friend, Corporal James Rivera, age 23, he didn't. He was killed by an IED on March 15, 2023, 3 weeks before we were supposed to rotate out. I was 20 feet away when it happened. I carried what was left of him to the medical truck. The courtroom was dead silent now. A woman in the second row wiped her eyes. Share this video with a veteran in your life who needs to know that their struggles matter. I came home to my wife, Sarah, and my daughter, Emma. She's 7 years old, Marcus continued. His voice was steadier now, as if speaking was releasing something that had been locked inside. I thought I was fine. I told everyone I was fine, but I wasn't sleeping. I'd see James every time I closed my eyes. I'd hear the explosion. I started drinking to make it stop. Sarah begged me to get help. I kept saying I was fine, that I just needed time, that Marines don't break down. Judge Caprio nodded slowly. His eyes never left Marcus's face. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Walsh, had put down her pen. This wasn't going how anyone expected. On July 22nd, I came home drunk at 3 in the afternoon, Marcus said. Emma ran to hug me. She was so happy to see Daddy. And I pushed her away. Not hard, but I pushed my baby girl away because I couldn't handle being touched. The look on her face, Your Honor, the confusion and hurt in her eyes. Sarah took Emma to her mother's house that night. She said she wasn't coming back until I got help. She said she loved me, but she had to protect our daughter from who I was becoming. Did you get help? Judge Caprio asked gently. Marcus shook his head. Tears ran freely down his face now. I tried, sir. I called the VA. They scheduled me an appointment for 6 weeks out. I called crisis lines. I told them I wasn't suicidal, so they said I didn't qualify for emergency services. I went to group therapy at the VFW, but sitting in a circle talking about feelings, I couldn't do it. I felt like I was failing at that too. Quote. The judge leaned forward. And the car registration, the license, quote. Sarah had been handling all that stuff while I was deployed, Marcus explained. When she left, everything started falling through the cracks. I forgot to renew the registration. I missed the court date for the first ticket because that was the day I finally got my VA appointment. I was in that waiting room for 4 hours, Your Honor. By the time they saw me, it was 6 p.m. By the time I got prescribed medication and made it through the pharmacy, it was almost 8. I missed the court appearance. Then my license got suspended for missing court, but I had to drive to the VA for my appointments. It's 40 minutes away and there's no bus route, so I kept driving illegally because the alternative was not getting help. Comment below if you've ever felt trapped between following the rules and getting the help you desperately needed. Judge Caprio sat back in his chair. He looked at Marcus Daniels for a long moment. Then he looked at ADA Walsh. Counselor, what's the state recommend here? Quote, Jennifer Walsh stood. She was 31 years old, Harvard Law, built a career on being tough on repeat offenders. But her voice was soft when she spoke. Your Honor, given the circumstances, the state would recommend time served, community service, and required enrollment in a treatment program. Sergeant Daniels, Judge Caprio said, do you still live in Providence? Quote, No, sir. I'm staying at the Riverside Motel off Route 1. It's $220 a week. I'm working nights at a warehouse, packing boxes. It's all I could get without a car, and even then I have to Uber there and back. Sarah won't let me come home until I'm better, and she's right not to. I don't trust myself around Emma right now. What happened to your Marine Corps salary? Your benefits? Quote, I'm getting disability, 30% for a shoulder injury. It's $524. $31 a month. The warehouse pays $13 an hour, but I can only get part-time shifts. After the motel and food and the Ubers to work and the VA, there's nothing left. I couldn't pay the registration renewal. I couldn't pay the first fine. I'm drowning, sir. Judge Caprio removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. When he looked up, there was something in his face that everyone in that courtroom would remember for the rest of their lives. Sergeant Daniels, I'm going to tell you something. My father was a milkman. He worked every day of his life to provide for his family. He taught me that a man's worth isn't measured by his mistakes, but by what he does after he makes them. You made mistakes. You're here. You're getting help. You're trying. That counts for something. The judge turned to his clerk. Patricia, what's the total in fines and fees Sergeant Daniels owes? Quote, $847, Your Honor, Patricia replied, checking her computer screen. Dismissed, Judge Caprio said. The word hung in the air. All of it dismissed. Marcus swayed on his feet. Sir, quote, You've paid enough, Judge Caprio said firmly. You've paid with your sleep, your family, your peace of mind. You've paid by serving this country for 12 years. You've paid by watching your brother die. The state of Rhode Island is not going to add to that bill. Like this video right now if you believe that's what real justice looks like. But Judge Caprio wasn't finished. He stood up from the bench, which never happened. Judges don't leave the bench in the middle of court. They don't walk down to the floor. They don't approach defendants. But Frank Caprio did. He walked straight to Marcus Daniels and put his hand on the Marine's shoulder. Son, look at me, he said. Marcus raised his head, tears streaming down his face. You are not broken. You are hurt. There's a difference. Broken things get thrown away. Hurt things get healed. You understand me? Quote. Marcus nodded, unable to speak. His whole body was shaking now. The dam had broken. This man who had carried a rifle through the mountains of Afghanistan, who had called in airstrikes and kicked in doors and done things he could never tell his daughter about. This man was sobbing in a Providence courtroom while a 78-year-old judge held his shoulder and refused to let go. Patricia, Judge Caprio called to his clerk, still holding Marcus. "Get me the number for Dr. Raymond Chen at the Providence VA. Tell him I'm calling personally about a priority case. And get me Kate Morrison from Veterans Services." He turned back to Marcus. "Dr. Chen is the best PTSD specialist in Rhode Island. He's a friend. He's going to see you this week, not in 6 weeks. Kate Morrison is going to help you navigate your benefits, get your disability rating reviewed, because 30% for what you're dealing with is ridiculous. And she's going to help you find housing." "Your Honor, I can't pay for," Marcus started. "Did I ask you to pay?" Judge Caprio interrupted. "This is what we do. This is what this city does for people who served. You took care of us over there. Now we take care of you here. That's the deal." Quote. The courtroom erupted in applause. Not polite golf claps, but real, sustained applause. People stood. The prosecutor was wiping her eyes. The bailiff, a 26-year veteran himself, stood at attention and saluted. Marcus returned the salute on instinct, then broke down again. Drop a comment telling us about a time someone went above and beyond to help you when you needed it most. But the story doesn't end there, and what happens next proves why this judge has become a legend. Because, at that moment, a woman stood up in the gallery. She was 62 years old, wearing a simple blue dress, silver hair pulled back in a bun. Her name was Margaret Rivera. "Excuse me, Your Honor," she called out. Her voice cracked with emotion. "May I approach?" Quote. Judge Caprio looked surprised, but nodded. "Please come forward." Margaret walked to the front of the courtroom. She looked at Marcus Daniels. Marcus looked at her. And then recognition hit him like a physical blow. His knees buckled. The bailiff caught him. "You're James's mother," Marcus whispered. "I am," Margaret said. She was crying too now. "I've been looking for you, Marcus. For 18 months I've been trying to find you. James talked about you in every letter, every phone call. You were his best friend. You were his brother. When they told me what happened, they said you carried him. They said you wouldn't leave him." "Ma'am, I'm so sorry," Marcus choked out. "I should have seen the IED. I should have been walking point. It should have been me." Margaret Rivera did something then that no one expected. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Marcus Daniels. This woman who had buried her only son, who had folded his flag and placed it on her mantle, who had every right to blame the man who survived when her boy didn't. She held him while he fell apart. "James wouldn't want this," she whispered, loud enough for the courtroom to hear. "He wouldn't want you destroying yourself over his death. He loved you. He told me that if anything happened to him, I should find you and tell you something. He made me promise. He said, 'Mom, if I don't come home, you tell Marcus that it wasn't his fault. You tell him to take care of Sarah and Emma. You tell him to live enough life for both of us.'" Quote. Share this with someone who needs to hear that forgiveness is possible, even in the darkest moments. Marcus was sobbing into this woman's shoulder now, 18 months of grief and guilt pouring out in that courtroom. Margaret held him like she'd held her son, like she'd held James when he was a boy with nightmares. And Judge Caprio stood there, watching this moment of healing happen in his courtroom, and for once the judge, who always had the right words to say, had nothing to add. Sometimes silence is wisdom. When Marcus finally pulled back, Margaret reached into her purse. She pulled out an envelope. "James wrote you a letter," she said, "before his last deployment. He gave it to me and said if anything happened, I should get this to you. I couldn't find you. The Corps wouldn't give me information. Sarah's number was disconnected. But I kept looking. I came to this courthouse today for a parking ticket, Marcus. A parking ticket. I heard the name Sergeant Marcus Daniels and I ran from the line outside. I almost didn't make it in time." Marcus took the envelope with shaking hands. His name was written on the front in James's handwriting. Judge Caprio gestured to his chambers. "Sergeant, Mrs. Rivera, would you like to use my chambers? Take all the time you need." They nodded and walked toward the door behind the bench. The courtroom remained standing. No one moved. No one spoke. They all understood they had witnessed something sacred. something that transcended the usual business of traffic court and small claims. Judge Caprio returned to his bench, but he didn't call the next case. "Folks," he said to the courtroom, "I've been doing this for 40 years. I've seen thousands of cases, met thousands of people. Today reminded me why I do this job. It's not about the laws on the books. It's about the human being standing before me. Every single person who comes through that door has a story. Every fine, every violation, every mistake, there's a person behind it. A person with pain and struggles and a life that's more complicated than any case file can show." He paused, looking around the room. "That young man served our country. He sacrificed things we can't imagine. And he came home to a system that made him jump through hoops just to get help. That's wrong. If anyone from the VA is watching this, and I know this courtroom is filmed, you should be ashamed. 6-week waits for a man who's suffering? Unacceptable. We can do better. We must do better. If you agree that we need to do more for our veterans, hit that subscribe button and share this video everywhere." 20 minutes later, Marcus and Margaret emerged from the judge's chambers. Marcus's eyes were red, but something had changed in his face. The tension was gone. He stood straighter, not with military rigidity, but with something else. Hope, maybe. Or peace. Margaret held his hand like a mother would. They walked back to the bench together. "Your Honor," Marcus said, his voice steady now. "I read the letter." James knew. Somehow, he knew he might not make it home. He wrote me instructions. He told me to stop blaming myself for things I couldn't control. He told me to be the father to Emma that he'd never get to be to his own kids. He told me to wake up every day and choose to live, really live, not just survive. He said that if I wasted my life on guilt, then the IED would have taken 2 men that day instead of 1. Judge Caprio nodded. Wise words from a young man. "Mrs. Rivera and I are going to stay in touch," Marcus continued. "She invited me to her home. She wants to share stories about James. She said Sarah and Emma should come too when I'm ready. She said James would want his family to know his family." "That's beautiful," Judge Caprio said. "Sergeant, I'm going to ask you to do something for me. Patricia is going to give you a number. I want you to call it once a week for the next 3 months and check in. Not officially, not as a court order, but as a friend, checking on a friend. Can you do that?" Quote. Marcus nodded. "Yes, sir. And Your Honor, thank you. You didn't have to do any of this." "Yes, I did," Judge Caprio said simply, "because that's what we do for each other. That's what humanity looks like. Now go, get yourself better, get your family back. And, Sergeant, thank you for your service. Really, from the bottom of my heart." Marcus saluted one more time. Judge Caprio returned it, the first time most people in that courtroom had ever seen the judge salute anyone. Marcus turned and walked toward the exit. Margaret walked with him. At the door, he paused and looked back at the courtroom full of strangers who had witnessed his breakdown and his breakthrough. Then he walked out into the October sunshine. The courtroom erupted again. This time, Judge Caprio let the applause continue. He looked around at all these faces, these people who had come for parking tickets and expired registrations and noise complaints, and he saw that they understood. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about seeing someone's humanity and choosing to lift them up instead of pushing them down. Comment below with the word justice if this story moved you. AD Jennifer Walsh approached the bench. "Your Honor, for the record, the state fully supports your ruling and asks that a note be entered into Sergeant Daniels' file indicating that all charges were dismissed with prejudice and cannot be refiled." "So ordered," Judge Caprio said. He signed the paperwork Patricia handed him. Next case. But the story, the real story, was just beginning. Because what happened over the next 3 months would prove that one moment of compassion could change not just one life, but ripple outward in ways no one could have predicted. Marcus called Judge Caprio's number every Tuesday at 2 p.m. for the next 12 weeks. Patricia would patch him through to the judge's chambers, and they would talk for 15 minutes, sometimes about treatment, sometimes about Emma, sometimes about nothing at all. Just checking in. Just being human beings, talking to each other. Dr. Raymond Chen saw Marcus 3 days after the court appearance. He spent 2 hours with him in that first session. He adjusted his medications, started him on a therapy protocol specifically designed for combat PTSD, and connected him with a veterans support group that met twice a week. The group was led by a former Army Ranger named Thomas Washington, 42 years old, who had been where Marcus was and made it to the other side. Kate Morrison from Veterans Services reviewed Marcus's disability claim. She was appalled at the 30% rating. She immediately filed an appeal with additional documentation from Dr. Chen. 6 weeks later, Marcus was reassessed at 70%, which brought his monthly payment to $1,716.28. It wasn't wealth, but it was enough to survive. It was enough to rent an actual apartment instead of living in a motel. It was enough to stop drowning. Sarah received a phone call from Margaret Rivera. At first, she was confused about how this woman got her number, until Margaret explained everything that had happened in the courtroom. Sarah listened to the whole story, and when Margaret finished, Sarah said something she hadn't said in months. "Tell Marcus to come home." Quote, "Let me tell you about the night Marcus Daniels came home. It was November 3rd, exactly 17 days after his court appearance. He had been sober for 17 days, he had been in therapy for 17 days, he had been on new medication that actually worked for 17 days. He had attended 11 support group meetings in 17 days. He had talked to Margaret Rivera 6 times. He had read James's letter at least 100 times. He stood outside the house he used to live in, the 3-bedroom ranch in Cranston, with the blue shutters and the maple tree in the front yard that Emma loved to climb. His heart was hammering. His palms were sweating. He had rehearsed what he would say to his daughter 50 times. He had rehearsed what he would say to his wife 100 times. But now, standing here with a bouquet of flowers in one hand and a teddy bear in the other, all those rehearsed words evaporated. The door opened. Emma stood there, 7 years old, missing her 2 front teeth, wearing a purple dress with sparkles. She looked at him for a long moment. Marcus held his breath. Then Emma smiled, the biggest smile he'd ever seen, and yelled, "Daddy!" and launched herself at him. He caught her, lifting her up, and she wrapped her arms around his neck and squeezed so tight he could barely breathe, and he didn't care. He would have stopped breathing entirely if it meant holding his daughter for one more second. Sarah appeared in the doorway. She was 32 years old, wearing jeans and an old college sweatshirt, her hair in a messy ponytail. She had been crying, he could tell. But she was smiling too. Hit that like button if you believe in second chances, and share this with someone who needs hope right now. "I talked to Dr. Chen," Sarah said, "and Mrs. Rivera, and your friend Thomas from the group. I needed to know you were really trying, Marcus. I needed to know this was real." "It's real," Marcus said, still holding Emma, who refused to let go. "I'm not fixed, Sarah. I'm not going to tell you I'm all better. But I'm trying. I'm really trying. I'm going to therapy twice a week. I'm taking my medication. I'm going to group. I called the judge like I promised. I'm doing everything, and I'm going to keep doing it because I can't lose you two. I can't lose my family." Sarah stepped forward. She touched his face, the way she used to before the deployments, before the war, before everything changed. "Then come inside," she said. "Come home." Quote, "They ate dinner together that night, spaghetti, Emma's favorite. They talked about school and therapy, and the new apartment Marcus had rented as a backup plan but wouldn't need now. They talked about Margaret Rivera and the plan to visit her next Sunday. They talked about James, and Emma asked questions about Uncle James, and Marcus answered them honestly, tears streaming down his face but voice steady. After dinner, Marcus read Emma 3 bedtime stories, tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and stood in her doorway, just watching her breathe. Later, lying in bed next to Sarah for the first time in months, Marcus told her about the courtroom, about breaking down in front of strangers, about Judge Caprio leaving the bench, about Margaret appearing like an angel sent by James himself, about the letter that had finally given him permission to forgive himself. "I want to do something," Marcus said. "I don't know what yet, but I want to help other veterans. I want to make sure what happened to me, the 6-week wait times and the bureaucracy and the falling through the cracks, I want to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else." Quote, "Then we'll figure it out together," Sarah said, "like we used to, like we're going to again." 3 weeks later, Marcus Daniels walked back into courtroom 2A, but this time he wasn't there for a case. He was there to see Judge Caprio. Patricia had scheduled him in during the lunch break. The judge was eating a sandwich at his desk when Marcus knocked. "Sergeant," Judge Caprio stood, smiling. Come in, how are you?" Quote, "I'm good, sir, really good. I wanted to thank you in person and show you this." Marcus handed him a document. It was a certificate of completion from a 40-hour peer support specialist training course. "I'm certified now to help other veterans. I'm volunteering at the VA 3 days a week, helping guys navigate the system. Thomas Washington from my support group helped me get the training. We're starting a program where veterans who've been through treatment help newly returned service members get connected to resources immediately. No 6-week waits." Judge Caprio read the certificate, and his eyes got wet. "Marcus, this is wonderful. I'm so proud of you." "There's more," Marcus said. "Margaret Rivera and I are working together. She's been volunteering with Gold Star families for years. We're creating a program that connects warriors who lost brothers with the families of the fallen. So much healing can happen when they come together. We saw it ourselves. We want to give that to others." "That's remarkable," Judge Caprio said. "Tell me how I can help." And that's how the Judge Caprio Veterans Advocacy Fund was born. The judge used his platform, his show Caught in Providence, which aired in 42 countries, to promote Marcus's peer support program. He hosted a fundraiser that raised $87,000 in the first month. That money went to emergency housing for homeless veterans, transportation vouchers for VA appointments, and grants for veterans starting small businesses. Marcus became the face of the program. He shared his story again and again in VFW halls and American Legion posts and high school assemblies. He told teenagers thinking about joining the military that service was noble, but they needed to prepare for the invisible wounds, not just the physical ones. He told veterans struggling with PTSD that asking for help wasn't weakness, it was the bravest thing they could do. He told families of service members that standing by their loved ones through the darkness was its own form of service. Drop a comment right now if you know a veteran who needs to hear about this program. 6 months after his court appearance, Marcus received a letter. It was from the office of the governor of Rhode Island. He was being honored with the governor's Veteran Service Award for his peer support work. The ceremony was in April. Judge Caprio attended. Margaret Rivera attended. Sarah and Emma attended. Thomas Washington attended. Dr. Chen attended. And in the audience, 23 veterans who Marcus had personally helped navigate the VA system, who had gotten into treatment faster because of his advocacy, who had found housing or jobs or just someone who understood. They all stood and applauded when Marcus's name was called. In his acceptance speech, Marcus told the story of the worst day of his life and the best day of his life. The worst day was March 15, 2023, when James died. The best day was October 17, 2024, when Judge Frank Caprio looked past the violations on a piece of paper and saw a human being who needed help. Justice, Marcus said to the crowd of politicians and veterans and families, isn't always about punishment. Sometimes justice is about seeing someone's pain and choosing compassion. Judge Caprio gave me that. He gave me a chance to become who I needed to be, and now I'm giving that chance to other veterans, one at a time, one day at a time. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Emma sat on Sarah's lap, clapping her hands, not really understanding the significance, but knowing her daddy was special. Judge Caprio wiped his eyes with a handkerchief and thought about his father, the milkman, about the lessons of hard work and compassion and treating people like human beings, not case numbers. This, he thought, this is why I do this job. But there's one more chapter to this story, and it's the one that will absolutely break your heart and put it back together again. Share this video with anyone who needs to believe in redemption and second chances. On March 15, 2025, exactly 2 years after James Rivera was killed, Marcus Daniels stood at Arlington National Cemetery. He had driven 8 hours from Providence with Sarah and Emma. Margaret Rivera was already there, having flown in from Rhode Island the day before. They met at Section 60, where America's newest heroes rest under matching white headstones. James Rivera's grave was marked with flowers, flags and personal mementos left by family and friends. Marcus placed a folded American flag at the base of the stone, a flag that had been flown over the Rhode Island State House in James's honor, secured through Judge Caprio's connections. Margaret placed her hand on the headstone. "Hi, baby," she said to her son. "I brought your brother home, the one you told me about, the one you loved. He's here, James. He's okay now. He made it through. And he's helping others make it through too, just like you would have done if you'd come home. I think you're probably proud of him." "I know I am." Emma, who had never met Uncle James but felt like she knew him from all the stories, placed a drawing she'd made next to the flag. It showed 3 stick figures, a tall man in a uniform labeled Uncle James, another tall man in a uniform labeled Daddy, and a small figure between them labeled me. Above them she had written in careful second-grade handwriting, "Heroes protect us." Marcus knelt in front of the grave. He pulled the letter from his pocket, the one James had written him, the one he'd read so many times the paper was soft as fabric. He read it out loud one more time, there in Arlington, with the wind blowing and the sun shining, and the weight of grief and gratitude both pressing on his chest. "James," he said when he finished reading, "I'm living for both of us now. Like you told me to. I'm taking care of Sarah and Emma. I'm taking care of your mom. I'm taking care of the guys still coming home with ghosts in their heads. I'm doing the work, brother. And I'm going to keep doing it until the day I stand before whatever God there is and you're there waiting and you can see for yourself that I didn't waste the life you helped save. I love you, brother. I'll see you on the far side." They stayed for an hour, sharing stories, crying, laughing, remembering. Other families came to visit their fallen heroes. An old couple, maybe in their 70s, noticed Marcus's uniform jacket with his unit patch and stopped. "Were you 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines?" the old man asked. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied. "Our grandson was too. He didn't make it home. They tell us there are men who served with him, but we've never met any of them. Would you mind if we asked you some questions about what he experienced?" Quote. Marcus looked at Sarah, who nodded. He looked at Margaret, who smiled. "Sir, ma'am, I'd be honored. Let me give you my number. We have a program that connects families with veterans who served with their loved ones. We can find the men who knew your grandson. We can arrange a meeting. You shouldn't have to wonder about his last days. We can help you know who he was over there." The old woman burst into tears and hugged Marcus. The old man shook his hand so hard Marcus thought he might break bones. They exchanged information. 2 weeks later, Marcus connected them with 3 Marines who had served with their grandson. Those Marines attended a dinner at the couple's home and spent 6 hours sharing stories and photos and memories. The couple said it was the first peace they'd felt in 3 years. That's what ripples look like. That's what happens when one judge makes one compassionate decision on one October morning in Providence, Rhode Island. The impact doesn't stop with one man. It spreads. It multiplies. It transforms. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications because the world needs more stories like this. 1 year after his court appearance, October 17, 2025, Marcus Daniels returned to Courtroom 2A one final time. This time, the court was packed not with people waiting for traffic violations, but with veterans, families, news crews, and city officials. Judge Caprio had agreed to let Marcus hold a special ceremony there, in the place where everything changed. Marcus stood at the front of the courtroom with Margaret Rivera on one side and Judge Caprio on the other. Sarah and Emma sat in the front row. Behind them, 47 veterans who had gone through Marcus's peer support program in the last year. 47 men and women who had gotten help faster, who had navigated the VA maze, who had found housing and treatment and hope because one Marine decided to turn his pain into purpose. "Your Honor," Marcus said, "1 year ago today, I stood in this spot as a broken man. I was drowning. I was failing. I had given up on myself. You looked past the paperwork and saw me, really saw me. You showed me compassion when I deserved punishment. You gave me a chance when you could have given me consequences. That moment, that single moment of kindness, it saved my life. Not figuratively. Literally. I had a plan, Your Honor. If that court date went badly, if I went to jail, if I lost everything, I had a plan to end my life. You stopped that. You changed everything." The courtroom was silent. Judge Caprio's hand shook as he gripped his gavel. "So today," Marcus continued, "all of us wanted to come here and say thank you. Not just me. All of us. Because your compassion didn't just change my life. It changed theirs too." He gestured to the veterans behind him. "When I tell them my story, when I tell them about the judge who dismissed my fines and made phone calls and refused to give up on me, it gives them hope. Hope that the system isn't all bureaucracy. Hope that there are people who care. Hope that asking for help can actually lead to help. You've touched more lives than you know, Your Honor, and we wanted you to know that." One by one, the veterans stood. They formed a line. Each one walked to Judge Caprio and shook his hand. Each one shared a one-sentence story. "Marcus helped me get into treatment in 2 days instead of 2 months. Marcus drove me to my VA appointments when I had no car. Marcus sat with me at 3 a.m. when I was having nightmares and talked me down. Marcus helped me get housing when I was living in my truck. Marcus got me connected to a job program, and now I'm working again." By the end, Judge Caprio was openly weeping. This man who had spent 4 decades on the bench, who had seen thousands of cases, who had built a reputation for compassion and wisdom, he stood there crying, while veteran after veteran thanked him for saving Marcus, who saved them. Like this video if you believe one person really can change the world. Margaret Rivera approached the bench. "Your Honor, James never got to meet you, but I think if he had, you two would have been friends. You both understand what matters. People. Not rules, not procedures, not protocols. People. Their hearts, their struggles, their worth. Thank you for seeing my son's best friend, the way James saw him, the way we all should see each other. Thank you for being the kind of man who climbs down from the bench and puts a hand on a broken person's shoulder. Thank you for being the kind of judge who knows that healing is more important than punishment. The world needs more people like you." Judge Caprio couldn't speak. He just nodded, tears rolling down his face. Finally, he said, "I'm just one man." Marcus did the work. He chose to get better. He chose to help others. "I just dismissed some tickets." "No, sir," Marcus said firmly. "You gave me hope, and hope changes everything." The ceremony ended with a presentation. The veterans had pooled their money and commissioned a plaque. It read, "Courtroom 2A, where justice met mercy, October 17, 2024. In honor of Judge Frank Caprio, who taught us that the law serves the people, not the other way around. With gratitude from the veterans whose lives were changed by one moment of compassion." Judge Caprio accepted the plaque. It would hang in his courtroom for the rest of his tenure and beyond. Every defendant who walked through those doors would see it. Every prosecutor, every lawyer, every person waiting for their case would read those words. And maybe, just maybe, understand that courts could be places of healing, not just punishment. After the ceremony, after the news crews left and the crowd dispersed, Marcus and Judge Caprio sat in the empty courtroom, just the two of them, in the place where it all changed. "How's Emma?" the judge asked. "She's great. She tells everyone her daddy helps heroes. She drew a picture of you in school and wrote that you're her hero too. Her teacher was confused until Sarah explained. Now the teacher uses our story in a lesson about kindness." Judge Caprio laughed. "I'm no hero, Marcus. I just did what was right." Quote, "That's what makes you a hero, sir, doing what's right when it would be easier not to. That's the definition." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Marcus said, "I got a call last week from a judge in California. She saw the video of my court appearance online. It's been viewed 4 million times. She wants to start a similar program out there, connecting veterans in her courtroom to faster resources. This is spreading, Your Honor. What you started here, it's going national. Other judges are paying attention. Other veteran services are taking note. You changed the template." "You changed the template," Judge Caprio corrected. "By being brave enough to be vulnerable, by doing the hard work of recovery, by turning your pain into service. That's all you, son." "It's both of us," Marcus said. You can't have one without the other. You gave me the chance. I took it. But if you hadn't given it, I wouldn't be here." Judge Caprio stood and extended his hand. Marcus shook it, then pulled the judge into a hug. They stood there, these two men from different generations and different worlds, bound together by a single morning in October, when compassion won over convention. Now, drop a comment below and tell us, have you ever received unexpected kindness when you needed it most? Or have you been the person who gave that kindness? Share your stories. The world needs to hear them. And hit that subscribe button, because we're going to keep bringing you stories that prove humanity is still worth believing in. The final epilogue comes from 3 years later, October 2027. Marcus Daniels, now 37 years old, stood in a different courtroom, this time in Washington, D.C. He was testifying before a congressional committee on Veterans Affairs. The Daniels-Rivera Act, named for Marcus and his fallen friend, was being considered. The bill would mandate maximum 7-day wait times for PTSD and mental health treatment at VA facilities nationwide, with emergency interventions available within 24 hours. It would fund peer support specialist programs in every state. It would create a database connecting Gold Star families with veterans who served alongside their fallen loved ones. The bill had bipartisan support. It had the backing of veterans organizations across the country, and it had a 78-year-old retired judge from Rhode Island sitting in the gallery, watching with pride as a man he'd almost sent to jail 3 years earlier changed national policy. Members of the committee, Marcus said in his testimony, 3 years ago I was suicidal, homeless, separated from my family, and facing jail time for violations I committed while trying to get help that the system made nearly impossible to access. One judge looked past my violations and saw my pain. He gave me a chance. That chance saved my life. But not every veteran gets that chance. Not every veteran walks into a courtroom and meets Judge Frank Caprio. We need to systematize compassion. We need to make it policy, not just hope that individual people will do the right thing. This bill does that. It ensures that every veteran, in every state, gets help when they need it, not when the bureaucracy finally processes their paperwork. I'm asking you to pass this bill. I'm asking you to give other veterans the chance that one judge gave me. The bill passed the committee unanimously. 6 months later, it passed the full House and Senate. On March 15, 2028, exactly 5 years after James Rivera died, the president signed the Daniels-Rivera Act into law. Marcus was there for the signing. So was Margaret. So was Judge Caprio. And on the president's desk during the ceremony was a framed photo of Corporal James Rivera in full dress uniform, smiling, Forever 23. In the photo next to it, Marcus Daniels and Judge Frank Caprio stood in Courtroom 2A on October 17, 2024, the day everything changed. The judge's hand was on Marcus's shoulder. Marcus was crying. The photo captured the exact moment when justice met mercy and proved that sometimes the most powerful thing a person in authority can do is simply see the humanity in the person standing before them. Share this video everywhere. Tag a veteran. Tag a judge. Tag anyone who works in a position where they have the power to choose punishment or compassion. Let them see what happens when we choose compassion. Let them see the ripples. Let them see that one moment, one decision, one act of kindness can literally change the course of human lives, can pass laws, can heal wounds, can bring hope to the hopeless. And if you're struggling right now, if you're the person who feels broken and alone and beyond help, watch this video again. Read these words again. Understand that Marcus Daniels was 24 hours from ending his life when he walked into that courtroom. Today, he's a national advocate, a peer support specialist, a husband, a father, and a man who helps other veterans find their way home from war. That transformation is possible. That hope is real. That help exists. You are not broken, you are hurt. And hurt things can heal. That's the final lesson from the day a Marine veteran broke down and Judge Caprio stopped everything. Punishment has its place. Rules matter. But behind every violation is a human being. And when we remember that, when we lead with compassion instead of judgment, when we ask, how can I help? Instead of how can I punish, we change lives, we change families, we change communities, we change the world. Comment hope below if this story gave you hope. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel if you believe in second chances and the power of human compassion. Because these stories matter. These moments matter. You matter. Judge Frank Caprio still presides over Courtroom 2A in Providence. The plaque still hangs on the wall. And every single day, he looks at it and remembers the Marine who came in broken and left with hope. He remembers that his job isn't to punish, it's to see people, really see them. And when he does, miracles happen. That's justice, that's mercy, that's humanity at its finest. That's what happens when one person decides that compassion matters more than convenience, that healing matters more than punishment, that people matter more than paperwork. Be that person. Be the Judge Caprio in someone's life. Be the person who stops everything and really sees the human being in front of you. Because you never know that one moment of kindness might save a life. It might change a nation. It might create ripples that spread for years and touch thousands of people. All from one choice in one moment on one October morning when a judge decided that mercy was more powerful than the gavel in his hand. Thank you for watching. Now go be the change. Go be the hope. Go be the person who stops everything to help someone who's drowning. The world is waiting for you.